Well, welcome everyone into another episode of the Story World podcast. Here with my boy Al. What's up, dog?
It's going great, Steve. How are you?
Man, doing good, doing good. Coming off the heels of watching one of the absolute best Star Trek episodes I've ever seen in my entire life, and that is saying a lot because I have watched very much Star Trek. So I'm
Nerd.
pumped. I'm jazzed. I'm ready to talk about stories.
Yes, I'm excited too. And interesting topic tonight. Obviously story themed, but we have kind of an interesting one for everyone. So the title of tonight's episode is Gossip. And I kind of had a little subtitle to it for called A Desire for Stories. So a little bit switch up tonight. Now, I think before we get into this, just a little upfront thing from Steve and I that we both agree that gossiping is something we should not be doing, but it's also something
Sure.
that everyone does. So Steve and I are guilty of it in anything we talk about tonight. We're going to be talking a little bit maybe about why we gossip and some of the interests that people have as it relates to stories. None of that is an excuse to gossip, but we're just kind of taking a little bit deep dive into that and how it relates to our desire for storytelling.
Absolutely. And I'm just gonna say, Alex, I believe it was the Lord's will for us to talk about this tonight because as soon as like just before we were signing on here to do this, I went to pee. And when I went to
Amen.
pee, there I opened up Twitter. Yes, I was on my phone while I peed.
Who
And
is it?
and I literally I opened Twitter and the very first thing I saw was a quote from a pastor that he had posted, and it said the most epic thing concerning gossip ever. And I thought, we have to just talk about this tonight. Now, no getting out of it. So I liked it. I liked the quote. I sent it to Alex. I said, man, I think this is great. So I'm just gonna read it to you. So by definition, this is the quote: gossip is when a negative is discussed with anyone who can't solve the problem. Now let me repeat that one more time. Gossip by definition, is when a negative is discussed with anyone who can't solve the problem. And if you think about that for more than 3 seconds, I think you realize, yeah, that is absolutely true. Like, if we get
Yeah.
right to the core of the issue, the remedy to gossip is to actually go to the source, right? To not be talking about whatever the problem is with who you are, but instead to be talking to whomever the problem,
Yeah.
originates with. Because with gossip, right, it's not like you don't gossip about something the president of the United States says, right? Necessarily, that's not gossip. I think that's just complaining. Gossip, I think, usually has sort of an assumption of of a closer, maybe circle of influence. Um,
It's really a layman's term answer too. It's very simple because sometimes I think we've gotten confused too. And how, like, what is it wrong to just like talk about like someone, like just something interesting that seems innocent versus not? And what I think is really important here is how it says discuss with anyone who can't solve the problem. So there's usually a problem involved when you're gossiping about someone. And so when you can't solve the problem, so if Brooke comes to me and says something, Steve and I, well, we just talked the other day. Steve and I each have about two or three friends. We can count them on our half a hand. And Steve's one of mine, I'm one of his. And so if Brooke came to me and said something about, hey, Steve's wife said something about them having some issues, I would go right to Steve. I'd say, hey, like, what's going on? Do you want to talk to me about it? Like, is anything happening?
right.
But if Brooke hears something through the grapevine about someone else in the church that I'm not super close with, and then we end up talking about it, then I go to Steve and I say, hey, did you hear about this problem? What do you think's going on? And so really when it gets down to it, that really is true that if it's a problem that you can solve, first of all, you should be helping solve that problem if it's in your power to at least try to help. But if it's not, then all you're doing is talking about it. And so, yeah, I think it's a great, very handy definition.
Yeah, and two, like, man, this there's so many rabbit holes you could go down here, but one thought that I have is, um, when you're gossiping or when somebody comes to you maybe with gossip, like a lot of times, it can be a pretty tough situation. And I'm just thinking about let's use the example of a church community, okay? Maybe there's something going on between church members or something that shouldn't be. And somebody comes to you with that. And it's like a problem that in one sense you feel almost morally obligated
Mm.
to address. Like maybe you should in this example, maybe you should go to the pastor with it. or, maybe it's happening at work and it's the kind of thing that's really detrimental to the workplace. And so in this example, maybe you should go to the boss with it. But in doing that, you may cause some serious damage with
Mm.
your relationship with one or more of the persons involved. And so these are really tricky waters to navigate. We'll talk more about that later. We're still kind of at the higher level right now, but um, it's really interesting.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. It's going to be a kind of crossover episode, right? Talking about kind of the evilness of gossip and kind of what it can lead to. And obviously, we don't. This isn't the podcast where we're talking about evil and right and wrong and preaching at you, but at the same time, it's going to cross over into the story part. And so, kind of how I thought about this idea for is our pastor. I forget specifically what he was talking. Oh, he not word for word, but he basically said along the lines that he's seen more congregations torn up by gossip than immorality. And other areas, he said that's probably like the number one thing. And what, first of all, that's not surprising. And so it got me thinking about like what it is that gets to me about gossiping. Cause uh sorry, my dog's making a weird noise. So I didn't know what that was. So because honestly, like when it comes to actually hearing about someone going through something bad, I hate hearing that about someone, and I usually just ignore it and I feel bad for them, and just you know hope that things get better. I don't like digging into people's private lives when things are going awful, but at the same time, there are certain things that if someone's going through something in life that might not be so bad and terrible and their life's coming apart, but something may be interesting, I really like to grasp onto that, and that's what usually brings me in to start wondering what's going on and talking to the wife about it and, kind of formulating thoughts. And so for me, and where it kind of gets down to in the story part is I love a good story. And I think that is where it gets to me. So yeah, what are your kind of thoughts on that, Steve? Just that initial premise of gossiping can be interesting just from the sheer fact that we like a good story.
Yeah, the desire, liking a good story. Well, ultimately, what it does, and I'm, me, I have to think in marketing terms.
Yes.
Um, usually, you don't gossip usually starts with just like like one way to put it would be getting wind of something, right? So you don't know the full story yet. And so what this does is it invites curiosity, and in marketing storytelling terms, it does what we call opening a story loop, right? It basically it creates a desire by dangling just a little bit of bait in front of you. So um yeah, so what's a good example? Like a good example might be something like you notice that something happens
Mhm.
and it's an odd thing that happened. And it's like it just makes you think like maybe, oh, I haven't seen that person in a while, or you know what I'm saying, that kind of thing. Or so and so said something that kind of sounded a little off or a little off character or something. And it just kind of invites that curiosity. And then maybe you talk to somebody about it and it's like, hey, what's up with so and so? Haven't seen them in a while, or they said this or that. And then they're like, oh, you haven't heard, right? And,
Right.
and
Come to my
then,
corner.
yeah, welcome to my parlor, said the spider to the fly.
I see it.
Um, and now you're screwed, right?
Yeah,
Now you're screwed
yeah.
because you're like, you know, unintentionally, or maybe intentionally, you have invited gossip, and
It
that's
it
tough.
it's interesting because we don't find our own lives interesting. Like, some people
That's
maybe
true.
do, but, like, we,
Yeah,
like, really
most
don't, and
people don't.
that's why and I still don't like talking about myself, especially, like, in a group of it's one-on-ones. Steve and I go back and forth about just, like, our own interests and everything, but if I'm in a group of people, I just prefer to listen. I don't really Steve's a little bit
Right.
opposite. He likes to talk, but Steve's
Ah,
a book of knowledge. But,
yeah.
I like to stay quiet and just kinda listen to people. Even during this podcast, I'm having to learn to come out of my shell and talk a little bit more about myself and my own thoughts because I just don't find myself interesting, but other people might. But we seem to find other people's lives very interesting.
Oh,
Taking
yeah.
it to like a fantasy sorts of it, we like to get lost in the fantasy world, whether it's watching or reading Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings or Twilight, and I know guys aren't supposed to watch that or read it, but
I love it. I
some
love it.
I did too. It's, anyway,
Yeah.
another topic for
Well,
another time. But,
yeah, yeah.
it's kind of like that. We also and then to apply it to real life, I think real recently about Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. I'm guilty of it too. I soaked that stuff up. I wasn't on it every day, but every couple days I'd say, okay, I got to catch up on the fun. And of course, there was some funny stuff that happened anyway. It was a really funny situation.
Yeah, at
But
church in our class last night, I brought that up and I asked
yeah,
everybody to admit it. I said, "Okay, who's been following along with the trial?" One
yeah.
person, like, ever so slightly raised their hand, you know?
But it's
So,
true when it comes to real life stuff. We find other people's lives very interesting. Yeah, we want to know what's going on.
yeah, and this is exactly why, okay, that in marketing, we tell people, like, to tell their stories, okay? This is exactly why, even though it may sound counterintuitive, people are really, really interesting and will be interested in things that you may not think they would when you give them interesting details about it. So, I mentioned a few weeks ago this sort of shift that I'm making in my business, honestly, based on this. And by the way you get from gossip to business conversations is because stories are freaking awesome. It's the most amazing thing in the world. So, right? So it's in my business, I mentioned this, and I'm trying to really make a shift from instead of just being in guru land all the time, hey, here's 10 things that you need to do to get better results with your email marketing. Yeah, that's interesting, but it's not nearly as interesting as my 10 email marketing fails and how you can avoid them. Why is that much more interesting? Because I'm letting you in. Now it's about my there's still value for you because I want you to avoid them, but just that title, which that's actually a pretty good title. I'm gonna have to write that down and use it. But that is like, um, it's almost voyeurism or something. I don't know. It's just really interesting. It's like, yeah, I want to peer in. I want to see other people's interesting failures. It's like one example that's maybe a little less vulnerable vulnerable than that is a guy that I'm a big fan of. He does a lot of writing, and one of the examples that he gave along these very lines is, for example, sharing the process behind how when they're creating a new product, uh, how they do their sketches for their product. He's like, you might think that when they're going to design a new feature or something, first they sketch it out. And he's like, you might think that's not very interesting. But he said surprisingly, people are really interested in it when they know that you're going to give them juicy details. He's like, for example, one of the details I shared is that I don't use a pen when I'm doing the markups or when I'm doing these mock-ups because with a pen you get such fine precision that it can lead you down the rabbit hole of creating details that are unnecessary at that phase in the process. So he says we create what are called fat marker sketches. I use a really fat marker because you're not allowed to get at a high level of fidelity with a fat marker. You can only make
Right.
something rough. And so that level of detail makes something interesting. So I know there's a little bit of a side note. It wasn't necessarily about gossip, but my point there was that what makes gossip what it is the very fact that we're so interested in other people. And so that's just to say a way that you can use this to your advantage is to let people in to the interesting details around things that you don't think are very interesting at all might be exactly the kind of behind the scenes show that somebody would want to see from you and could create connection with you. So it's in a sense, it's a way to use what makes gossip interesting to your advantage instead of it being a negative thing. So
Mm. No, those are good points. Who would have thought that you could relate gossiping to marketing?
exactly. Right? Let me actually on that point, okay, one more thing, okay? So a big marketing, I don't wanna say ploy because that sounds really bad, but
Why?
a tactic, a tactic that some people used probably, I think in the early 2000s, so in the, like,
Yep.
2010s and maybe up till that point, that was used was this idea of signing an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, okay? And so there was, there's a social network thing that was gonna be started. I think it's a social network called Riplin. It never took off the ground, but that's only because the people who were supposed to deliver on the product didn't. The marketing worked, and within, like, literally weeks, they had, like, 1 point something million
Wow.
users signed up and ready to use this platform, and it spread on the basis of this non-disclosure agreement tactic. So the whole point was that whatever this was so secretive, so exclusive or whatever, that when you got into it, you had to sign a non-disclosure agreement to make sure that you wouldn't tell anybody or whatever.
That's
Of
funny.
course, that's the very thing that makes people want to tell others about it. And so it spread like wildfire. So again, what's the point? Like, that's gossip, right? In a sense, that's gossip. It's that desire, it's that motivation for wanting to get into other people's little nitty-gritty details. So yeah, it's a huge thing because it trades on like one of the very number one bits about human emotion, which is curiosity. People are curious, and
Mhm.
gossip really gets into that. So yeah, there you go.
That's really interesting. That it doesn't surprise me at all that that ended up working. The NDA thing.
Right?
That's
Yeah,
pretty
me
good.
neither. Now, would I ever use that in my business? No. But
Funny.
it, that it worked is really fascinating. So yeah.
So just looking at Steve's and my kind of routes with our notes, Steve's kind of going one route for something gossip related. I'm kind of taking another route. So I'll finish up kind of with my point on how
Yeah.
I'm thinking about gossip. So I guess there's always like the the quote unquote innocent part of any transgression or sin, and then there's always the guilty part of it. You know, the innocent part's just the excuse. So the innocent part is we're curious of, you know, people, and we like a good story, and we eat that stuff up all day. And I think sitting here, unless you kind of are a really bad person, you don't want to end up finding out something that is like ripping apart like a family, or, you know, like in the end, you don't want like a gossip thing to be totally bad because you don't want to see people go through something bad. But we want it to be just like juicy enough where it kind of satisfies our desire for a good story. Now, um, where I think the really bad thing about the trap that that gets into is how we start seeing other people. So if you're reading a book, a very well written book where the author is setting up a lot of secretive stuff and you're trying to figure out what is going on, I guess you could take a mystery novel, but even in like a really good story that just uses some of those themes, you might start thinking about, okay, who actually is the bad person, or this person is bad, but do they have a good motive, and do they just seem bad? And you start wondering about the people's real motives and what they're actually going through. And the same exact thing applies to what we think of people in our own life. So if you catch wind of something about friends that you know or a family member, and then you start thinking about what it could be, leading to conclusions, your brain is automatically thinking about things about that person that probably 90% of the time is just not true. And even though we might not think about it or notice it right away, just subtly and subconsciously, you thinking a certain way about someone and how they're acting or why they're behaving a certain way can really affect how you look at that person. And it really can mess up your relationships on that front. And honestly, just the fact of just thinking poorly of someone else with no basis at all. And that's really the trap that ultimately gets into that curiosity of a good story that might seem innocent at first, but really can be quite damaging.
Yeah, that's for certain. And I'll just come in because one of the points that I wanted to make is just a perfect dovetail to that. And it's just that, relationships are arguably the most important things in life. You're there's a saying that I will totally botch, but it's something something to do with the fact that, at the end of the day, all you have is like something and then the relationships you build. Okay. And I forget what something is in that
Yeah.
in that case, but the relationships you build with people really matter. And gossip destroys relationships. I mean, that's what gossip does. So I would say that using other people's misfortune as a way of, medicine or healing or entertainment for yourself. In my book, that's kind of no bueno. Shouldn't go there. So
Yeah.
it's no good.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Very good. Okay. one more thought that I had, is that was that all your thoughts? Did you have some
That's
additional?
kinda all my thoughts, yeah, just,
Yeah,
I think I touched, what I wanted
okay.
to on the story aspect of it and that curiosity nature of it.
Yeah, yeah, very good. So, really the only other thing I wanted to say, has to do with less marketing, but certainly business. And that is, because gossip can destroy relationships. I mean, some of the most important relationships you have are with the people who you do life with on a regular basis, including those at your workplace. I mean, let's be honest, there are some people who see their coworkers more than they see their own families. And actually there's probably a lot of people in that boat. And so gossip can very quickly destroy an organization. And I'll back when I was still working full time at the law firm. I mean, I just barely had a business on the side, but it was there. I was reading books that would hopefully prepare me one day for being at a later, being at a better and bigger place with the business. And now that I'm there, I appreciate that. And one of the books was Dave Ramsey's Entree Leadership, and uh, I definitely remember him, and I just looked up the quote, one of the quotes a minute ago. I'm going to read it to you, but I remember him talking about this, and he treats gossip like the cancer that it is, in his business and Ramsey Solutions. I mean, they've got probably close to 1,000 people working there now, and so it's a pretty big company, pretty big deal. And it's like, your gossip could just totally destroy. Um, a company like that. So I'm going to quote from the book Entree Leadership. Dave Ramsey says this: "I hate gossip so badly that after putting up with it at the start, I decided to have a no gossip policy in our company. You're not allowed to gossip and work for me. If one of my leaders or I catch a team member gossiping, we will warn them once, then we will fire them. Yes, I have actually fired people for gossiping, and I will again. Gossip is evil, it is insidious, and it is contagious. Stamp out gossip if you want unity. Proverbs says, whoever guards his mouth and tongue keeps his soul from troubles," end quote. And yeah, just totally agree. I mean, you know, I I have a small team that works with me. All told, there's like, 7 of us. But any of them can connect with one another via like direct messaging in our project management software, apart from me. And so there's always that chance that my people are literally talking behind my back. And I and
If
I
I worked for you, Steve, I would definitely be talking.
I'm
Right?
sure, right? Yeah, and I would have no way of knowing, right? And so it's definitely something where you need to be careful. And I think it's important to just set that tone in the culture. Um from the start. And if everyone's getting along, then it's all good. I mean, some things are obviously out of your control, but if it's I one of the stories, it's either from the book or it was a story that he told on one of his podcast episodes. Um, but um, it was a story. Pardon me. It was a story just about how gossip um uh gets stamped out in the relationship, uh or in the company, excuse me, because people are afraid of losing their jobs. In other words, someone will come to an employee and start gossiping. Uh-oh, my lights are shutting off on on the video. Oh no, oh no. Pause for a quick home assistant break. Alexa, video recording. Nice. Boom. Yes, I have invited China into my home to help me control my lights. It is amazing. So the what the employees will end up doing is saying, if somebody's being gossiped to, oftentimes they will shut down the conversation right there and say, "Hey, look, I don't want to get fired, so you need to stop gossiping to
Mhm.
me." So the culture is actually that
Yeah.
allergic to gossip that the employees stop it without the leadership team needing to, which is pretty cool.
Maybe this isn't the best way to look at it, but think about the time efficiency too. The increased efficiency
Oh
just
yeah,
by waste time of not talking about people.
100%. Yeah.
Excellent, Steve.
Very
That's
good.
good stuff.
Cool, man. Yeah,
Awesome. Is that everything
absolutely.
you wanted to say about it?
I think so. I think so. Let's move
Perfect.
on.
Yeah, yeah, let's move on. So a little bit different this week. Instead of doing our story of the week, it's been a couple months, I think, since we've done this, but we're just going to give a little update on kind of what's happening, not just kind of specifically with Steve's marketing or specifically like my one thing, but just kind of update on what's going on overall in our lives and just kind of keep everyone in tune there. So I'll go first. I think I mentioned it a few weeks ago, but I'll mention it again. So I got a new job. I can't believe it's gone by this fast. I've already finished. Today marks a month there. So already,
Wow. Holy
yeah,
cow.
that
That's
went by
awesome.
really quickly. So really enjoying it so far. Really loving it. Great people I work with, close to home. Just some excellent stuff. And one of the very good benefits is actually having a defined work schedule. And before, I really thought kind of a flexible work schedule was good, but I work better with the structure. My prior job was starting to kind of leak into like night work and weekend work. It just was not working out well. So with this setup, it's given me a great system where I can actually schedule working on my writing and other hobbies that I have, running, and just spending time with family, not being stressed out. So far it's been just really excellent so far. So one of the big updates that I have aside from that job is I have finally been able to dedicate the time, and I have finally finished outlining my book. Like chapter to chapter from beginning to end. And so I think I had said, I don't know if I was talking about it on here to Steve separately, but there was one or two things that I know I wanted the start of the book to happen. I know how I wanted it to end. And I needed to figure out something to connect it. And I was just kind of struggling on how that would work because I want to have other books that take place in this world and just thinking about the repercussions of forming a magic system this way. And so I think I found something that really makes it great. And once I had that settled, I think it didn't take me long, a few hours at the most, to sit down and just outline the rest of the chapters that I was going to be working on. And then even after I finished outlining those, I ended up thinking about even just more stuff that just worked it in perfectly. So, yeah, so that's exciting. I see the whole book outlaid before me and what I want to do. And so I have a pretty modest goal of the amount of pages I want to write each day. It's a very small amount, but in addition to that, I'm also just working on other side stuff. I'm outlining probably for more things, writing a little bit of more background for characters and just kind of additional stuff. I'm also big into maps. And so I'll probably be writing some maps for the book, drawing them out. And so um very modest goal of writing each day. And then as soon as the first draft's done, edit that. And then probably once the second draft is done, send it on over to five or so different people. And Steve will be one of the lucky winners to get a chance to read it before everyone else. So yeah, exciting stuff there.
Oh man, super cool. Yeah, I love
Yeah,
to hear that. Glad the new job is going well.
definitely.
The time differential ratio, whatever, being working out better for you is super exciting to hear because
Absolutely.
a lot sometimes it doesn't work out that way, right? You take a new job, like,
Right.
oh, they
Yeah.
promised this, they promised that, and then they
Yeah.
said that, and then it's
Yeah.
not that way.
Yeah.
Um, so for me, nothing is too very interesting. Frankly, in my life right now, in the sense of, I guess in one sense, no news is good news. All right, things are chugging along
Mhm.
just fine, and I am uh there's always a little something going on, right? In the sense of I'm always thinking about how to better refine the business model. I took some time to explain sort of to Alex the other day a little bit about what we're thinking, just honing in more on the kind of work uh that we do. Our company is really good, and we do a lot of, sort of by accident. I mean, we didn't design it this way, it just kind of happened. We sort of end up doing a lot of like online course websites. um and so I've been thinking about um, how to make the business more, uh, I guess, productized in a sense, in that way that is more repeatable, right? More system, more process, more structure. Less snowflakes. Every website is sort of the same because that's how you get a really good team and a really good process. One thing that did happen there is it's kind of uh, a blessing in disguise, and I don't have time to tell the story. Um, Maybe I'll tell it to Alex though after we get off this because it's actually really cool. But essentially, I last Friday, my guy who does the mock-ups in for my business. So we take on a new client, and the first thing we do is basically a homepage mock-up based on a questionnaire that they submit to us. He took a new job, and he had to basically cut off some of his freelance work, and we were on the chopping block, so he had to leave. and uh, by the next day, I had his replacement. And the story of how that worked out is just crazy. But as of today, so that was, remember, this was last Friday. It hasn't even been a week. Today, she delivered the first mock-up for a project that we're working on, and it's absolutely fantastic. It's
Awesome.
really good.
That's
And so
great.
I don't get me wrong, I missed the guy who we were working with. I mean, he was absolutely great, a really good dude. He did a great job. But sort of thanks to, again, the relationships that we've built and the connections we have, the business didn't miss a beat. And actually we were able to bring someone in who worked with us a little bit before in a different capacity. I noticed at that time that she did really great work. And I just, on a whim, I thought, hey, I'm gonna maybe offer this position to her and see what she thinks. And she took it. So she's
Cool.
working with us,
That's awesome.
and I had delivered a great mock-up today, so I'm really excited about the future of things from that regard. So, I guess I'll just kind of wrap up my updates by saying this. I decided I don't like setting goals, and this is actually really odd for me because I listen to a lot of like achievement stuff. I use a planner that is focused on goal setting. I always liked the idea of setting goals, but in practice, I was never good at it. I would always set goals, and then those priorities or those goals would always sort of like fall to the wayside by whatever priority was sort of happening in the moment. And I don't get me wrong, I think some people are motivated by goals. I think goals are perfectly fine for some people to have. For me, I found that I want my goals to be more about the person I want to become on a regular basis. What I really want to do is just sort of show up, do the best work I possibly can, and then make good decisions. There's a great book if you're into this kind of thing called Decision Making in the Will of God that talks about this a little bit, especially if you're a Christian. Obviously, you'll find that more fascinating or helpful than others will. But really, just taking each day step by step and making a good decision with the information you have, and striving to do good work and have good habits on a regular basis. I think that in the long term, at least for me, and maybe others might find some freedom in this, is more impactful than just trying to set arbitrary goals. Because one of the big problems with goals is that you always set a goal um, as the person you are now, but by the time you reach a goal, a lot of times you're an entirely different person, and so you sort of arbitrarily have this moving mark where you're always, I don't know, in a sense, playing catch up. Your goals 6 months from now really can't account for the person that you'll be in 6 months based on circumstances in life that happen, etc. So for me, I find it's more about showing up every day and doing little things and making good decisions.
Uh,
And yeah, go ahead.
no, no. Are you? I didn't want to interrupt. Sorry.
No, no, it's okay. I just sort of, so one little thought on that, and we'll go all deep into this. But the other night, I had a random wild hair, and I stayed up till 3 o'clock in the morning working on a new website idea that I had. And it's not like, oh, I'm starting a new business. It's not really that. I have an idea for something that 3 months ago, when I do goal setting for this quarter or just whatever, I would have never put this as a goal. But based on what I just told y'all about, hey, it looks like we're doing a little more learning management systems, course sites. So I'm trying to create an environment for that. Um, Literally, this idea popped up about a site where, just to tease a little bit, where you could leave online reviews for courses and online influencers, because it's really hard to know who to trust because the internet's kind of like the wild wild west, and this sort of thing doesn't really exist right now. And based on the kind of work we're doing, it would be a really, frankly, a great marketing thing for our business to be associated with a site where people could go leave independent reviews of courses that they've taken and influencers that they follow online and membership sites and things like that. So that's just an example of something. And will anything happen with that? I don't know. But the point is, it's an opportunity that came up based on something that I had no inclination to just put together. And it came out of nowhere, and I put it together, and we'll see if it goes anywhere and does anything. And you can only do that when you have the mindset, I think, of showing up, being flexible, making good decisions with the information you have, and doing that. So that's how I do life. And maybe you found something there you can use in your own.
I think you and I have had a kind of similar journey as far as the goal setting, because goal setting never. It took a long time to realize that just does not work for me at all. So
Yeah, really
I
interesting.
don't have any goals for when I want this book to be done or how many books I'm going to write for this, or how many pages I want it to be, or just anything like
Yeah.
that.
See, isn't that fascinating?
I
That's
literally just
fascinating.
have a daily thing like, okay, I know that the most I ever schedule out is a week just to plan out my schedule of when I want to do things. But it's not until I get to that day where I think, okay, here's what I want to get done. And like I said, I have a very modest goal, very,
Yeah,
very modest of what I want to write each day. I know that if I just do that each day, then I'll get it done when it gets done. And
exactly. And see, I
yeah,
don't really think of that as a, um so I think some people would call that a goal, but I think that's arbitrary, right? I wouldn't call that a goal. So I like to name things. Marketing guy can't help it. So um, when I set quote unquote goals, I call them life pattern goals. And what I mean by that is it's more about a person. It's more about the person who I want to be and the patterns that are taking place in my life. Am I speaking well about my kids? Am I doing the best work that I possibly can every day? These sorts of things.
yeah,
Um, are they habits? Kinda. I mean, I feel like exercise every day is kind of more of a habit than but maybe it's not. I don't know. So anyway, I'm just more interested in that because I think um those are targets that are easier to hit and that make more sense in the long term because you know a goal of I'm going to lose 100 pounds by December 31st
mhm,
doesn't it doesn't give you any information about how you're going to accomplish that. But a target of I'm going to eat one meal a day and exercise for an hour a day from now until December 31st, that is that has content to it. That actually
yeah.
gives you something that you're going to do and to get there. And so I think to me that's more manageable, more exciting, and something you can see more progress on than, oh, I'm going to lose 100 pounds by December. No, you're not. You're going to eat Ritz crackers and freaking ice cream up until then because
And
the
that's
goal's too
okay.
far away. And that's
And Ritz
okay.
crackers with ice cream.
Well, we should end on that note. That is disgusting. Okay.
That sounds good to me.
Okay. Fantastic. All right, guys. Well, thank y'all for listening in. It's been a fun one, been a different one.
It's a good one.
Don't gossip. Gossip is bad. Any South Park fans out there? Gossip is bad. I'm going. You'll get that if you're a South Park fan. Anyway, if you're not, you shouldn't be. You shouldn't be a South Park fan. That's probably not a good thing to be.
Why
Um,
bring that up, Steve? You derailed this whole thing.
I know. I know. Isn't that awful? That's awful. Oh man.
Oh, all right, good
It's
stuff.
terrible. All right. Well, God bless. And I hope y'all have a wonderful day. Hey, share the podcast with your friends. We're
Good
over,
podcast.
a couple hundred downloads now, which is really exciting for us. I
Yep.
don't know if we've shared any numbers publicly, but I'm just being honest. I mean, that's where we're at right
And
now. So
what we've noticed is that it's consistent. We have the same amount of downloads per episode that comes out. So it
yeah,
really what comes down to is there's a certain number of people, maybe all the people are downloading episodes that keep listening to every single one. And that
yeah,
really helps just to keep that
that's
consistent. So
so
keep
awesome.
listening.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
keep listening. Tell your friends, and we'll talk later.
See ya.